Hello and welcome back to the channel. As always, I'm your host, Morgan. And before we jump into the topic of today, I would just like to thank everybody who's being very patient with me as we have these weird lighting situations, weird surroundings, and kind of an odd upload schedule because who knew adjusting to a traveling job would be so difficult? But I digress, and now let's talk about the subject matter. So about a month or so ago, I released a video talking about the difference between feral and wild horses because as both an ecology person and a self-proclaimed horse girl, one of the things that really grinds my gears and a little bit of a pet peeve for me is when people kind of confuse wild and feral. Now, I get that it's not necessarily a huge deal all of the time, but in certain discussions, it is necessary to make that distinction. A little bit of a recap of that is we were specifically talking about the North American Mustangs, mainly because that is the feral breed of horse I am most familiar with. And Mustangs specifically are a breed of horse from the horse subspecies Equus ferus caballus, which is the domesticated horse species. There's only one extant wild horse subspecies, and that is Equus ferus przewalski, and we will not be talking about them today. However, if you want to hear a little bit more about the differences, please go check out my previous video that will be linked down in the pinned comment below. Now, fast forward a little bit, if you get to the end of that video, you'll notice I talk about the Bureau of Land Management and how Mustang populations are kind of managed in the United States. It is important to recognize that these horses are not actually native to our ecosystem. While equines did originally evolve in North America, they did go extinct about 10,000 years ago and were reintroduced when settlers from Europe brought them with them approximately 500-ish years ago. Now, these numbers are kind of ballparks, they're not exact, and they're about what we think is correct. Recognize that that means the ecosystem was without these very large mammals for thousands of years. So that brings us to really the issue is that Mustangs are in North America not necessarily for their value to the ecosystem, but because of their historical and cultural value. And you know what? There's not necessarily anything wrong with that. However, that does mean that their populations do need to be managed to ensure that the ecosystem can sustain these feral populations that we have. And that brings us to our topic for realsies this time. So a few days after I published my video, the New York Times released an article where they were talking about how these Bureau of Land Management branded Mustangs are being found in slaughter buyer arenas and pens. Now, for those of you that don't know, horse slaughter for human consumption is illegal in the United States. I believe that horse slaughter full stop is illegal, but that may or may not be entirely correct. So please correct me if I am wrong there. Now, while horse slaughter is illegal in the United States, there are still people known as kill buyers. And what a kill buyer is there's someone that goes around to auctions usually and they buy unwanted horses very cheap. They hold them in these facilities, often just called kill pens, usually by the Canadian or Mexican border. And you can purchase a horse off of those kill pens to give them a new lease on life. And a lot of times the prices to spring horses from these pens is quite high. And ultimately anything that doesn't get bought by someone concerned wanting to give them a second chance at life does end up getting shipped over the international borders and sent to slaughter. I get that that is a lot of really horrible things to talk about right at the beginning here, but there is a reason. And the issue here is that in this New York Times article, it's kind of implied that the Bureau of Land Management is directly selling the Mustangs to slaughter. And the issue with that is that the Bureau of Land Management is already very demonized for controlling these horse populations as it is. Now, we do need to unpack some things because I don't think they're necessarily blameless in all of this. And I'm in no way defending everything that the Bureau of Land Management or BLM from here on out in the video, because it's a lot easier to say. Bureau of Land Management's official acronym is BLM. So we're going to be saying that from here on out. Now, the BLM is not entirely blameless in this because it is partially their policies that we're going to talk a little bit about today that has kind of fed into this. However, it's also not necessarily the BLM to blame for these horses ending up in these kill pens. And before you crucify me in the comments, please hear me out here. Now, the Bureau of Land Management is the Department of the Interior. They're in that umbrella, and they're charged with managing a lot of land and a lot of species. One of the programs they're in charge of is the free roaming Mustangs and burros that do roam the western United States. And again, these are animals that are not native to our ecosystem. They're not there because of an ecological value. They're there because of a historical and cultural value, which is valid. I myself am in favor of having wild Mustangs. However, I do recognize the need for humans to manage their populations because horses in general are very resilient and very good at surviving. And because of this, there is a danger that they are going to outcompete other mammals and other animals in the ecosystem, i.e. things like pronghorns and bison. Now, there's also smaller animals to consider as well, but we're looking at big animals, so let's look at some other big animals. And because of this, we're already at a point where our horse populations are already above projected levels that our ecosystems can sustain here. Now, people from the horse world will disagree with this, but the data does say that the populations are too big. So the choices that we have to manage these populations are either roundups and adoptions of adoptable animals or birth control of one form or another. And the birth control options that have been going on in these horse herds is some cases you get a dart of a drug that effectively sterilizes a mare. A mare is a female horse, for those of you that don't know. So basically, you either go and shoot a dart that has a drug in it that will sterilize a mare for X number of years. I think it's like 2 to 5, but I've read conflicting numbers. And another option that would include a roundup as well would be just sterilization of these mares, full stop. And that helps control the birth rates in these herds, and you leave the stallions intact to do the things that stallions do. And frankly, birth control is not a bad option, especially if you are not in favor of these roundups and adoptions. But let's get into what actually goes on at these roundups and adoptions. So the roundups tend to happen with these helicopters and other things of that nature, because when you need to go over these very large ranges and often rugged terrain looking for an animal, you're going to spot them you're going to spot them from the air. And helicopters are also used when you're looking for things like bighorn sheep and also species of deer that tend to have these very large ranges and live in these very rugged terrains. Horses are no different. But the thing that people get upset about is that you also use helicopters and also in some cases ATVs and things like that to then herd the horses in the direction you want them to go, and you put them into pens. Yes, you can find very traumatizing videos and images of these processes because they can go very wrong when you do have stressed out, scared animals. I am not going to say that the animals do not get stressed out and scared when this happens, because that would be a lie. However, as of right now, this is likely the most humane method of roundup, because we're talking about controlling these populations, and you have to put it into perspective and think about what level of cruelty you're willing to endure. And if you're trying to protect the ecosystem as a whole, you need to accept the fact that population management is going to have some level of cruelty to it. Do I necessarily think this cruelty is a good thing? No. Do I wish it didn't have to be this way? Yeah. But again, the populations do need to be controlled. They do need to be managed. And that's where the Bureau of Land Management comes in. And once you've rounded up these horses and the ones that can be adopted out have been separated out, you get a lovely little brand, usually a freeze brand on the side of their neck. And if you know what the symbols mean, you have an idea of when the horse was born, where it was originally pulled off the range, and oodles of other things. And once that happens, these horses go to holding pens and wait for adopters. Now, in recent years, there has been very little demand and too many horses. So they've started this program where after, I think it's a year at this point of you owning the horse, you get $1,000. And that's around the time that you would get paperwork saying this is for surezies, for realsies, your horse now. And there is that waiting period. Now, the big controversy here comes in where we're getting these kill buyers that are kind of taking advantage of loopholes in the system. So normally for every single person every year, there is a very finite cap on how many horses you can adopt from the Bureau of Land Management. I think that number is either 4 or 5, but I'm not looking at it right now. And now, in 1 year, you can adopt 4 or 5 animals. However, that's not a cap for a household. So if you have 5 people in your household, every single person can adopt potentially 5 animals. And if you qualify for that $1,000 deal, everyone's going to get that for all of their animals. So the kill buyers are kind of using this loophole to purchase these Mustangs, get that $1,000, and then these animals are ending up in kill pens. Now, over that year, you're not allowed to sell the horse or do anything like that. There are rules and regulations that you must adhere to. However, we are also looking at a branch of government that's not necessarily the most funded, a program that is probably the most misunderstood and one of the more demonized ones when you talk about the Bureau of Land Management, which is a little interesting to me because people on the horse side of this demonize the Bureau of Land Management, saying, oh, they only care about the ranchers. However, on the flip side, the ranchers say, oh, the Bureau of Land Management, BLM, is horrible because they just want to keep us from using the land. But that's a whole nother issue that we're not really talking about. It's just something that I find interesting that I do kind of want to point out here because maybe it's relevant, maybe it's not. But the thing that's going on that has people very upset is the fact that these kill buyers are exploiting the loopholes in the system. And one of the things that is being called to have ended full stop is that $1,000 incentive program. I have some thoughts and feelings about it. I don't necessarily know that I like the incentive program, but I do understand why it was implemented to try to get more actual responsible adopters that want to give these horses awesome homes and take the time to gentle and train them. Unfortunately, we have these bad people that want to exploit the system and are just in it for money. And that's where we end up finding these Mustangs in kill pens, which is not a place they're supposed to end up according to all the paperwork that goes into it, according to policy. And this calls into the question, should there be more vetting for adopters? Absolutely, I believe that there should be. And how long should this vetting process last? Should we extend how long a person needs to wait until they officially get this horse is mine paperwork? How long should this process go? Like, what needs to happen here? I don't have the answers. Frankly, yes, I do think the vetting process should be more rigorous for adopters, and I do think that there should be more check-ins, and I do think that there should be more accountability to try to prevent the kill buyers from exploiting these loopholes. Realistically, do I think all of that's going to happen? Maybe, maybe not. We'll see, because all of that also takes money, and that's really an issue here. But one thing that can potentially kind of close at least some of the loopholes is a bill that has been trying to go on to add on to another law to kind of close some of these horse slaughter loopholes. And essentially what it would do is it would make it illegal to sell horses over the borders to be specifically slaughtered for human consumption. Now, I'll link some more stuff about that bill down below, but I do think it's likely legislation like this is going to be the best way to close that. And legislation like that is not just going to help North America's Mustangs, it's going to help any horse in the United States. But then that's also going to call into other sales questions. Other loopholes will open up. Kill buyers are still going to figure out how to do the things that they do. And that's the sad reality of it. But the topic here is that the Bureau of Land Management is not directly selling to slaughter. Yes, kill buyers are taking advantage of these loopholes. But no, the Bureau of Land Management is not directly selling to kill buyers. Directly selling to slaughter. But the only real way to stop this from happening is a more rigorous vetting process of adopters of these BLM Mustangs and kind of a whole rework of this adoption system in general, as well as changes in our legislation and pushing through bills that would close up that channel to sell horses over national borders for the purpose of slaughter. I do understand that even if that does get pushed through, which is very likely to do so, these kill buyers are just going to find another way to keep doing what they're doing, and that's the harsh reality there. Sometimes reality is not fun. This is one of those not fun realities. Do I wish that we can in the future figure out a way to stop that altogether? Of course I do. But the situation right now, it's not realistic to say it's going to come to an end full stop. But we can make it a little more difficult for the kill buyers to do what they're doing. And I think that that is a positive thing, in the very least, and a baby step in the right direction. Now, the other issue here is that people, again, with the roundups, you will constantly see on a lot of these activist sites, oh, it's helicopter season again. These horses are enduring unspeakable cruelty, and you're going to see photos going around showing the worst of the worst. Again, no, this is not all sunshine and rainbows. But if you're not okay with any more roundups, if you're not okay with any more adoptions, because there is a call to have the roundups and the adoptions full stop. You have to be okay with sterilization. You have to be okay with birth control. Because as much as you would like to believe it, these horses are not native species in these ecosystems. They are naturalized species. And they do damage to these ecosystems. So because they're being preserved for these cultural and historical values, to be responsible, we need to manage those populations to make sure they don't overtax the ecosystems that they're living in. And that is what the Bureau of Land Management is doing, or at least attempting to do. Do I think that it's perfect? Do I think that they really do their job well all the time, especially when it comes to these horses and burros? No. But they are a branch of government, and unfortunately, government's not always very efficient and kind of tends to be cold. But please understand that articles like the one from the New York Times are sensationalizing the story, and that the real people who are doing awful things here are those that are exploiting loopholes in the system that we should be working to close, instead of demonizing the people that are working to preserve the ecosystem while preserving a sustainable population of horses as well. I don't have a whole lot more to say on this topic right now. I'll keep an eye on it, and I understand that this video was a little rambly, but I think that what I said needed to be said. I will link a couple of articles, one that will just kind of explain the situation going on, and a couple about those bills that I mentioned. So the Bureau of Land Management, they're not perfect, but they're also not necessarily the enemy in this situation. The Bureau of Land Management is not selling these horses directly to slaughter. It's these kill buyers that have found a loophole in the system, and in the end, what needs to be done is the loophole needs to be closed. And that's the only way to fix that problem of seeing these Mustangs end up in the kill pens. So I know that it's easy to blame the BLM, but let's try to pump the brakes and put the pitchforks down for a minute here and think about this bigger picture. And if you're going to remain staunchly against roundups and adoptions, then you need to reconsider birth control for the mares in these herds as a form of population management. I understand that both things have a level of cruelty, but that is the reality of the world we live in, and sometimes you have to figure out what level of cruelty you're okay with. That being said, I stand by everything I said in my previous video. I stand by everything I say in this video. I would like to keep this conversation going down in the comments if you would like. So please see me there. And I do hope that perhaps you'll even consider clicking like or subscribe, or if you just thought that everything I said here was completely terrible, I'm a horrible person, go ahead and give me a dislike. That's feedback too, and I like feedback. Quick heads up though, if you're going to just comment something nasty about how I'm clearly a terrible person or an animal abuser or I don't really love my horse, that will be reported and that will be deleted, because I'm not going to take crap like that. And I just wanted to give that little disclaimer for anyone that got this far to see that. But if you do want to have a respectful, intelligent conversation about the issue at hand, please, let's engage in the comments. I'm very open to that. I'm open to hearing other opinions. But with all that being said, I hope you have a lovely afternoon, morning, evening, what have you, and I will see you all in the next one. Thank you again for watching this video. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe, and ring that bell if you would like to see more. And if you'd like to follow me on any of my other social medias, the links are down in the description below. Don't forget to check out thereptilegoth.com for all of my articles and blog posts. If you found any value in this video and you would like to help support the channel, please check out my Patreon page. That link is also in the description down below. And a special thanks goes out to my Diamond Dragon patron, Diane B. What you're doing is really helping me fund a dream here. I will see you guys all in the next one.